fiscal cliff is a combination of expiring tax cuts and across-the-board government spending cuts. The following set of revenue and spending measures were set to expire or take effect January 1st, 2013. The Bush-era tax cuts expired on December 31st, 2012, raising all income taxes as well as rates on estate and capital gain taxes. The Social Security payroll tax holiday expired December 31st, raising the rate from 4.2 to 6.2%. Some provisions in the Obama health care legislation, including increased tax rates on higher income earners, were set to take effect in January 2013. The automatic spending cuts or sequester legislation by the Budget Control Act of 2011 planned to hit or take effect January 2nd, 2013. Half of the scheduled annual cuts will come directly from the national defense budget, half from the non-defense. The eligibility to begin receiving federal unemployment benefits, last extended in February, were set to expire December 31st. In the Medicare Doc Fix Act, the rates at which Medicare pays physicians will reduce by nearly 30% on December 31st. The fiscal cliff is in many ways the culmination of a series of increasing, continuous fiscal showdowns between Republicans and Democrats over the last few years. Most critics believe that the lack of a comprehensive long-term deal on the deficit reduction has propelled the use of short-term political expedites like the Doc Fix and other extenders. Republicans favor spending cuts as well as a primary means to achieve the deficit reduction. Most have publicly pledged to oppose all tax hikes, suggesting that tax cuts boost economic growth and in turn government revenue. Democrats typically believe that tax increases should be a part of any bargain to reduce long-term entitlement spending and have generally supported greater reductions in the defense budget. The fiscal cliff roots from the failure of President Obama and Congress to reach a compromise on taxes and spending in 2011. 3 hours before the midnight deadline of January 1st, 2013, Senate agreed to a deal that would avert the fiscal cliff. The deal consisted of an increase in payroll tax by 2 to 6.2% for income up to $113,000 and the reversal of the Bush tax cuts for individuals making more than $400,000. The fiscal cliff agreement is good news to some extent, although it shouldn't be ignored that lawmakers had 507 days since the August 2011 debt ceiling agreement to address this problem, and it still came down to the last hours before they were able to reach a solution. The Democrats wanted to see more taxes increase, especially from the nation's wealthy. Republicans favored more spending cuts, especially to entitlements like Medicare and Medicaid. The two sides had a difficult time coming to any sort of agreement, and the agreement that they came to only addressed the revenue side, but postponed any decision of spending cuts to the so-called sequester until March 1st. And on a long-term basis, the cliff deal did little to address the country's debt load, which currently stands at $16.4 trillion and counting. On March 1st, 2013, the U.S. has entered the dreaded sequester, and a very costly consequence of the federal government failing to reach a budget deal by their self-imposed deadline, March 1st. This is one of, for the history books, the largest automatic across-the-board spending cuts in American history. The sequester won't lead to across-the-board tax hikes, as the fiscal cliff threatened to do, but it will result in sweeping cuts to the government services that millions of Americans rely on. Most immediately, the cuts will impact millions of jobless Americans whose unemployment checks will be reduced by upwards of 10%, beginning as early as mid-March. It will also result in widespread service cuts, furloughs, and layoffs across the government agencies. The sequester means more than $85 billion in automatic across-the-board spending cuts to military and domestic programs over the next 7 months. Only a handful of services are exempt from these cuts, including some basic safety nets, like Social Security, retirement funds, veteran benefits, Medicaid, and refundable tax credits. All this could have been avoided if there would have been an agreement made between the Democrats and Republicans before March 1st.